For most of its run, House of the Dragon has avoided too many direct connections to Game of Thrones, which is a good thing given it's a trap many prequels can fall foul of. That there are 170 years or so between the two shows certainly makes it easier, but nonetheless, it's largely not been too nudge-nudge, wink-wink when it comes to the franchise connections. Or rather, it hadn't, until House of the Dragon Season 2's ending. Although much is focused on its own story, it includes Daemon Targaryen having a vision of Daenerys Targaryen, a White Walker, and the Three-Eyed Raven, as well as other things such as Rhaenyra Targaryen on the Iron Throne. There is some logic to Daemon having the vision within the show, but unfortunately, I don't think it's good for Game of Thrones ending. I've always defended Season 8, including the series finale, but such direct links between the shows don't benefit either one. House of the Dragon sets up a version of Game of Thrones Season 8 that doesn't exist. It's a strange choice given what happens. There are a few meanings to be gleaned from Daemon's vision, which, in terms of House of the Dragon, connects to Aegon the Conqueror's Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, and how Rhaenyra needs to sit the Iron Throne. That's all well and good, leading to Daemon bending the knee. It makes sense. What's not so good, however, is that it so overtly features the White Walkers and Daenerys Targaryen, suggesting she was the key to defeating them. Indeed, because it not only shows Dany, but does so following on from a White Walker, a Red Comet, and her dragon eggs, then what it really seems to be saying is that Daenerys is the prince that was promised, or princess, in this case. It makes a direct connection between the prophecy of Aegon, driving the story of Daemon and Rhaenyra, and where it all ends up with Daenerys, meaning she needs to sit the Iron Throne and is the hero who will defeat the White Walkers. The problem, of course, is that Game of Thrones Season 8 has already happened, and House of the Dragon is setting up a version of events that doesn't come to pass. Sure, you can argue about how Dany was important to defeating the White Walkers. It's true that, without her, and those who followed her, the Night King probably would have won. But she didn't sit the Iron Throne when the Long Night came, and Game of Thrones did absolutely nothing with the prince that was promised prophecy, never confirming their identity. It makes sense to use the prophecy for Rhaenyra's story, believing the prophesied savior comes from her bloodline, but I find it really strange to so strongly suggest events to come when we already know they don't. Even including the Three-Eyed Raven is an odd choice as, again, Game of Thrones never really explained it. House of the Dragon's visions highlight Game of Thrones Season 8's flaws. Game of Thrones could have done more with Daenerys and the White Walkers. I like a lot of Game of Thrones Season 8, love parts of it, and think Daenerys' story, on the whole, really works, even her becoming the so-called Mad Queen and then being killed by Jon Snow. But it did have its flaws, and House of the Dragon so directly connecting to it via Daemon's visions only serves to highlight those. The final season of Game of Thrones was rushed, and needed a lot more time with the White Walkers as the overarching threat, and then more time with Daenerys replacing them as the villain, as it were. Each could have been their own season, really. In particular, it always frustrated me that the show did so little with the prince that was promised or Azor Ahai prophecies, and explained hardly anything about the White Walkers and the Three-Eyed. Notably, they were all very strong fantasy elements, the type of which the show often tried to downplay where it could. It loved the dragons for the spectacle, but a lot of the magic was often stripped away, and with Daemon's visions going so hard into those very same fantasy aspects, it shows how Game of Thrones could have handled them better. If we knew who the prince that was promised was, or had clearer explanations for the White Walkers, it would make a lot more sense to include them here. But we don't, so I do think it's a mistake.